Welcome back to the IBFP. Here's your host, Boxing Nuke.
Welcome back, fight fans. Welcome back. Let's just dig right into it. Gilberto Ramirez has called out Saul Canelo Alvarez at 168 pounds. This is a direct quote and statement from Gilberto Ramirez. He basically stated, Canelo, here is my title. Come and get it. He would love to face a Canelo Alvarez in a big payday fight, in a huge mega fight for his belt. That would be a major fight. Let's break down a stylistic matchup a little bit here. Saul Canelo Alvarez has 50 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws with 34 knockouts. He primarily fights at 160 pounds. He's 28 years old, 5'8", and has a 70.5-inch reach. And so his last 2 fights obviously came against a Gennady Golovkin, the hardest punching motherfucker at 160 pounds. He was not stopped. He was not dropped during those 2 fights. He showed to have a granite chin. So that's going to be a big thing, especially if you're moving up in weight. In the reverse end with Gilberto Ramirez, he is 38-0 with 25 knockouts. He stands at 6'1.5 feet tall with a 75-inch reach. His last fight came against a Roma Angulo, in which he defeated over a 12-round unanimous decision. So I think this would be a great stylistic matchup for Canelo Alvarez facing an undefeated world champion in a Gilberto Ramirez. I think it'll be an interesting fight, and I also think that he will present certain challenges and struggles for Canelo, but ultimately I see Canelo being able to stop and maybe even drop him a few extra times during the fight before he stopped. And the only reason I feel so strongly about this is because I've seen him hurt and wobbled against a Jesse Hart, who is still almost on a prospect level. I don't see Jesse Hart as a special type of fighter, and this was in 2017. Now, it is quite possible that Gilberto Ramirez has adjusted some of his skill sets and honed in on some of the basics of boxing, and utilizing his range and distance in the Canelo fight would be a huge plus. And so I can understand that Gilberto Ramirez is not a pushover. He's not a bad fighter. He's a very good fighter, but I don't believe him to be elite. He's not shown those abilities as of yet. And so until he does, I'm not 100% convinced that he'll give Canelo that much of a fight. Now, I do believe that Canelo Alvarez has the boxing ability and skill to box with anyone from 154 pounds to 168 pounds. There's no one in those 3 weight divisions from 154, 160, and 168 that can just thoroughly outbox Canelo, and Canelo will have no chance. There's no one. Canelo's an elite fighter, and he may be the best in those 3 divisions. We have yet to see that. The most stacked division in talent is 160 pounds. That's why most people prefer him to fight at 160, to see how he stacks up against a Daniel Jacobs, against a Demetrius Andre, a Billy Joe Saunders, these top level fighters, Jamal Charlo, who's still, somewhat of a prospect. People are just more intrigued by those fights, but fighting at 160 isn't an issue either. Stepping in, taking bigger fights. But since Canelo's so short in comparison to everyone at 168 pounds, you're going to always be giving up height and reach, and not just by a little bit, by a dramatic amount. Then on top of that, these guys are naturally bigger men in a higher weight class who hit harder and who are able to absorb more punishment. And so at what point does size become too much of a factor for Canelo? And that's why I was leaning towards him only fighting at 160, hoping that this would be his only fight at 168. But depending on how Canelo defeats Rocky Fielding, how well he absorbs those punches, and how hard he hits, if his power moves up cleanly and clearly, then maybe he can compete at 160 much easier, and that'll change my whole perspective on it. Canelo has the talent and skill set to compete with anyone, so I'm not concerned about that. It's the size and power that's concerning, but I do believe Canelo would edge out of Gilberto Ramirez, if not by unanimous decision, by an easily stoppage, or at least knocking him down a few times. He's shown an ability to be able to get hurt and to mix up punches and not be able to box effectively and efficiently. So he's a little bit off, clumsy. Gilberto Ramirez just has to tighten up his fundamentals, and then I'll see more of a push for this fight. You remember Gennady Golovkin was attempting to move up to face Gilberto Ramirez at 168 pounds because Gilberto Ramirez was looking at looking as a fundamentally flawed boxer. And so guys felt they could take advantage of that, and that fight was always considered. Gilberto Ramirez is with Top Rank, so if Canelo were to get a deal done, it would have to be a cross-promotion deal with ESPN's Top Rank. He couldn't ultimately sign with those guys, with Oscar De La Hoya, but that remains to be seen. Once again, it's the IBFP. Please share, like, and you must subscribe.